Hey everyone, Emmerron here. So this week has been another pretty crazy one for me, content creation wise. But I am going to try and get these out as quick as possible and then resume our normal schedule, hopefully next week, of having these out on a standard weekly basis every Saturday morning. So this week on How to GM, or for this episode rather, as I am kind of still in catch-up mode, I wanted to talk about the usage of what I call minigame DLC within Cyberpunk and how we can kind of use these collectively to tell a story and like how we can maybe build a gig off of this. Now, I'm not going to take all the credit for this one. I'm going to give credit where it's due. Some of this is based on an experience I had at Gen Con playing a game of Elflines Online with James Hutt. So James was our GM. He, for those of you who are unaware, is the one of the lead writers on Cyberpunk Red. Namely, he's the guy who many of us refer to as the mayor of Balancetown. He does all the balance and numbers work for the game to make sure that the unfair stuff doesn't happen. So he is also one of the people single-handedly responsible for the creation of Elflines Online as a DLC pack in Cyberpunk. So when we talk about this, that is going to be one of the prime focuses of this discussion, because it is by far, by large, the biggest fleshed out DLC they have of this type. There are a couple others. We did talk about one of these that kind of exists already. It's a little less of a mini game and a little more of an augmentation on some of the downtime activities you can do in the game. This would be, of course, Salvaging Night City. I will link the video to our discussion about that above here, because we did talk a little bit about that DLC as its own, and I will probably have additional videos covering each of these DLCs individually, with the exception maybe of the ELO ones, which I might do as a single video, because I think they all kind of work together to form a more cohesive kind of add-on to the game. Before we get into the meat of today's episode, I do want to thank my August patrons, so I'm going to do that now. Thank you to all my patrons for the month of August. Your support makes doing what I do easier and allows me to do more with the time that I have. Thank you all so much. If you would like to support me in what I do, please join these fine people by following the link in the description below. Now back to the video. Thank you all. All right. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what is a minigame DLC. So in my personal definition, a minigame DLC is an activity that a DLC adds to the game that it did not ship with, and that doesn't provide a strict mechanical bonus to players like gear or pharmaceuticals do. So when we talk about that, the DLC as of now, at the end of August 2023, that we have for the game that I would classify as part of this, we have the Stickball DLC, we have the 4 Elflines Online DLCs, and we have the Salvaging Night City DLC, which, like I said, kind of fits this category. And we have the Dating in Night City, or Dating in the Dark Future DLC. As I mention each of these, I'll have an image up on the screen to give you an idea of what they are, how it works, so that way you have a better idea. So let's talk about these one kind of group at a time. So first, Stickball is literally, it's a street game that you could play in the game. It just revolves around you maybe marking up a street map. So this is one that might require a bit of a battle map, because it is a very visual, very, stratified kind of game that you do need a good visual reference to actually play. It involves 2 teams. using electrified lacrosse sticks and a ball, trying to score on each other. It is described in a style very reminiscent of like street football, where it gets rough, anything kind of goes, and it's a way to allow for like street level skirmishes that really don't require much in the way of equipment. I'm going to pull this up on the screen now so that you all can kind of read through it with me, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. So bear with me just a moment. All right, so this is Stickball, also known as the sport of the street. So setting up the field to play Stickball, a third party, ideally, although when one isn't available, the team that was challenged fills this role instead, paints 3 circular areas with glow paint. They designate 1 circle to serve as the goal circle of each team, and the third circle to be neutral. Ball is then placed in each of the 3 circles. Similarly, the third party marks 6 X's on the ground in glow paint as the starting points for each 3-player team. Any obstacle on the field when the circles are drawn, including burned out cars, breaks in the concrete, or low-lying walls, remain in place and must be maneuvered around, over, or through. So once the game begins, it doesn't end until a team is victorious. No timeouts or time limits. There are no rules except the following: no motorized vehicles, no more than 3 people on your team on the field. You cannot replace team members who are knocked out or injured during gameplay. No one off the field is allowed to interfere with the game except to carry injured players off court and render them medical attention. The game does not stop while they do so. So you could literally have the med tech catch strays on this. No non-sanctioned rubber ammunition, so they have special ammunition for this. No methods of combat capable of causing critical injuries or reducing a target to under 1 HP are allowed. So this is, in theory, a non-lethal game. And I say in theory because, as we know, there's always going to be someone who either takes it too far or uses this as an excuse to try and kill someone that they deem, a dangerous rival or something. So microwavers, acid paintballs, heavy handguns loaded with stickball sanctioned rubber ammunition, smoke grenades, stun batons, stun guns, and of course stickball sticks are all popular weapons used in stickball. So these are more or less our like sanctioned list of stuff that we can kind of use, right? So we have, similar to other guns, we have a range table here that you would use as part of the game here. Inline skates, skateboards, and less than lethal cyberware, especially skate feet, are always permitted. Armor is a necessity in all matches where it isn't banned. Stickball is played as a combat and begins with initiative. The game ends when one team or the other has placed all 3 electrified balls in their circle. Until then, it is considered fair play to remove balls from the opposing team's circle. So basically, you're just trying to get it over into your circle. And I'm going to see, because I believe, yeah, here we go. We got the kind of the layout here. So team 1 starts here, team 2 starts here. This is the neutral circle. This is team 1 circle. This is team 2 circle. So team 1 is trying to steal the ball here and move it here. Team 2 is trying to steal the ball here and move it to here. So the concept, obviously gets pretty violent there. So pick up as an action, you can replace half of a 2 rate of fire attack. You can magnetically pick up and lock a free grounded ball within 2 meters or yards of you into your stickball stick or into one of your free hands. When you pick up a stickball ball without using a stickball stick, it electrocutes you and you suffer 3d6 damage directly to your HP. If the damage would reduce you to under 1 HP, you're instead unconscious at 1 HP. If you take a turn holding an electrified ball, you immediately take damage as described above. So, in other words, not encouraged to grab one of these. Guarding is an action that can replace half of a 2 rate of fire attack. Made while wielding a stickball stick, you can make a contested athletic skill check against a target within 2 meters or yards of you. If you beat them until the end of your next turn, you are considered to be guarding them. And whenever they move, you can move up to an amount equal to double your move in meters or yards to remain within 2 meters or yards of them. However, if they do something that would require a check for you to keep up with, like a trick they made in their inline skates, which again, this is going to tie into another DLC, which I may not talk about specifically in this video in detail, but there's Spinning Your Wheels, which is a bike and skating DLC that adds a bunch of those items and a lot of the movement and kind of tricks and things like that associated with those. So if you have questions about this, I would encourage you to go out and look at that DLC. I'm going to link below, by the way, to all the DLCs we talk about today, just so that you can all access them easily. These are all free on our Telsarian's website, which is why I have no problem pulling them up, kind of reading through them in full to you all, because these are free. So I would highly encourage you go download them, read them, understand them, because I'm only going to do so much justice to these, particularly when, like Stickball, I've never used in a game yet. So it does lead to some interesting narrative things, though, which we will talk about here once we're kind of done talking through this. So as an action, the current players have a 2 rate of fire attack. The player can throw one of the balls loaded into their stickball stick or held in one of their hands to another player or to a point in space with an athletic skill check. Use the passing and shooting range to determine the DV. Maximum range for throwing by hand is 24 meters or yards. If the check succeeds, the ball lands in the point in space chosen or is automatically caught by the player being passed to in either their hands or own stickball stick. For the dangers of catching a ball by hand. So yeah, like, or C pickup for the dangers of doing that, yeah. So if the check fails, GM places the ball wherever they feel is appropriate within the range band of the missed shot as a ground ball. Passing or shooting while guarded or passing to a guarded player imposes a -2 penalty to the athletic skill check. So this is where, you know, you start getting into the actual trying to score and stuff. Making an escalating challenge. Stickball is playing as an alternative, to gang violence among some gangs and occasionally other groups in Night City. So this is where we start talking about the narrative potential of this. And we're not going to go through all the gear and stuff. I might do that more in like a separate video to kind of talk through this. But the essence here is that very simple. You can have it escalate because it is an alternative to you resolving things as like 2 gangs or gang affiliated parties of some kind. Or maybe, you know, you are a group living in an apartment that isn't affiliated with a gang, and the gang lives in the building or owns the building or controls the building. You know, it's their turf. And you are done, you know, dealing with the fact that you don't got water in your apartment, but they seem to have water for days for their rooftop parties. So you play this to get them to actually fucking do something. So this would be a table where it's like, okay, we're going to escalate this because, you know, we're both heated. We both have egos. So now we have a D10 table here that let us kind of be, you know, part of the condition, right? So you can't beat us on our home turf. We're going to play in a restricted area. You can have an extra player. Want to make this interesting, 100 EB. So literally this is going to be, you know, betting on things, beat you one hand cuffed behind our backs. So all of this is going to be stuff where it escalates things a little bit. And then they've got this little story here at the end. Again, not going to read through that in this video. So primarily, the reason I want to talk about this is because Stickball is generally viewed, based on how the DLC frames it, as a combat zoner sport. It is not something you're going to see in an executive zone or even probably some of the safer zones throughout the city. Maybe you'll see some of this in the overpacked suburbs, especially those that kind of fringe the combat zones. But this is, you know, supposed to be one of those games like you grew up in a rough neighborhood, you're going to be playing this. And so this is something where we can tie a bunch of stories to this, where either the players, you know, they can play a game of this, or because we know the rules of this game, we can set it up as like, hey, you know, we've got the, say, Piranhas and 6th Street, right? And, or better yet, actually, we got the Piranhas and we've got Generation Red, right? Both of these are like younger party gangs or yo gangs, which if you don't know about Generation Red, I highly recommend you read DangerGal.ca. It is a paid book, but it has a lot of great lore and faction information, and it does fill a lot of holes in and gives you a lot of groups to use when you're kind of considering narratives like this. But, you know, 2 younger gangs have a scuffle. Maybe they played a game of stickball and one of them thinks the other did them dirty, right? And you as an Edge Runner crew get brought in by the, let's say the sore losers here, right? And they're like, you got to make it right. You're going to go get their leader. You're going to bring him to us alive and we're going to make an example out of him. Well, this leads to some interesting implications because now we could talk about, you know, maybe, oh yeah, he's claiming this, but at the same time, maybe the truth of the situation is, they just are indeed a sore loser. Or maybe they are telling some truth, like, oh yeah, the person had a real gun on the field or something like that, or they had a pop up in their cyber fingers that they used, and that's why I missed that shot or couldn't block them or whatever, right? They can come up with all kinds of excuses. How legit they are up to you and your group and your intuition and your investigation skills on this. But it does lead to a more interesting kind of conflict than just hey, this group stole something of ours, go kill them and get it back. You don't want to kill either side here. They're just saying we got beef with each other. We want an example made of the people that would do this to us, right? So it is an interesting concept. And this could lead to some other neat kind of stuff. So they also talk about Digital Gladiator in a sidebar here. We won't talk about that in this video. It is part of Black Chrome, which is another book that I constantly recommend to people to pick up, because it does open some very interesting concepts for not just GMs, but players. Digital Gladiator being one of them. They've got like a whole chapter on apps for your agent that you can go out and you can kind of invest into, and it lets you do all kinds of neat stuff. So I know we encountered some uses for that in Neon Inferno, and we also had some other interest in doing things like Digital Gladiator from the group as well. So Stickball, rough and tumble sport of the street, leads to certain kinds of narratives being possible. And I, not that I want to rate kind of all of these, but overall, I think for GM purposes as like an adventure hook, I'd give this a solid like 7 out of 10. It's not going to work in every story. It's not going to work in every part of the city, but those parts of the city where you're coming out of the combat zone, which a lot of Edge Runner stories start there. You're all going to be, living in cargo containers, most of which are in like bad parts of the city. This is probably going to be part of that, right? So now that we've talked through Stickball, let's go over to running the date path, which is part of the digital dating DLC. So give me just a moment. I'll get that pulled up. All right. So here we digital dating in the dark future. So this is where we kind of start leaning on my experience at Gen Con. So this alone is not a particularly, let's say, particularly interactive DLC, but like the Life Path, this aims to tell a story with time compression involved, right? We're not looking to wander into a bar and hear about how the rocker boy in the group is trying to get laid or whatever. We are here to, compress some of that experience into a readable form, right? Some kind of quick story that we can talk about around the table without it being awkward or crossing, some really hard lines for the people that, like I'm not a GM who particularly enjoys role playing through those kind of scenarios either. So this is a kind of a good way to navigate the type of players who, maybe want to do stuff along those lines. I think personally, as just an aside to the DLC itself, I think that kind of player is probably not mature enough to play Cyberpunk Red, but you never know, right? Some people might be on the younger side and they want to be a little edgy or whatever. Or perhaps you are role-playing character like a rocker boy, like, man, the gigs have been light recently. I want to go out and find someone while I got the time. Let's search up garden dating, right? And so in the Gen Con game, this was used as the hook for our adventure, which is really interesting. So we start the date path here with, you made a match. So you roll on 2D100 tables to determine which two keywords we've looked up to determine or we've got one D100 table, excuse me, but we roll on it twice to describe who, we've found and the kind of person they might be, right? Because unlike, more real life examples like Tinder, you're not writing a whole bio. You're getting 2 keywords and that's it. So you got to describe yourself in 2 words, and that's how other people will find you. So you've made a match based on 2 keywords that you roll. So now we start talking about, so now let's give your match a first name if you don't know anything else about them. That's what the first date is for. So we will now kind of talk through, like what's the person's name, or at least what's their handle, right? So with that in mind, you might go to a name generator, like the fantasy name generator that I've shown in the past in other videos. Again, I'll link that down below here on this video. But this is a lot of fun because this ends up being very like, okay, we already have a start, we have a name, and now we roll evens or odds on any size dice. So I usually like rolling those on like a D6, just because I like the cubic shape of a D6. And on evens, we get this D10 table. On odds, we get this D10 table. And, it leads us to where we're going. And so what is your date? So in other words, what are you doing, right? So based on where we are in this set of tables, we now scroll the appropriate one. So just for the fun of it, let me do what I'm saying, right? So let me roll a D6, evens, because I rolled a 4. Now I roll, this is my percentile die. Here's my D10. So I rolled a 4. So we got evens, 4. So we're in Moral Rock, which is not what I would say is, a particularly, hip hop happening place in the city. So you got a fairy to catch. Roll 1d6. So D6. We were looking at a 1. Watch a test of the orbital mass driver's giant steel doors. So you just be sitting there watching these like giant metal doors open and close. Very, very interesting. So how does our date go? Time has come for your date, but will it be a good or a weird one? We roll a D10. We get a 5. So on a 5 to 8, you have a weird date. So that something's off about the vibe here. Roll a D6. We have a 6. Your date is a lot of cybernetics, a dangerous amount. They might be sparking. That's good. So we've got someone who maybe is a little maelstrom, or at the very least, they like chrome, maybe a little too much. Next, what the hell is going on here? Roll a D6, we get a 2. Your date starts a fight, then quickly finishes it. They have a base 16 and a combat-related skill of the GM's choice. Great. So you watch your date get up, and when one of the researchers who are testing, or the engineers rather, who are testing these giant steel doors open and close, your date gets bumped on the shoulder as one of them hurries past, as one of the giant hydraulic cylinders that are controlling this thing bursts open. And they don't maybe have the greatest control over their mind, and they punch the dude out with some martial arts. You just watch them kung fu punch that guy, and he may be dead. You're not sure yet. So the weird date ends. So roll a d6 to see how it ends. They insist on showing you their good luck charm. Roll the most valued possession you own table in the core rulebook. So we're not going to do that, but yeah, they want to show you good luck charm. So very cool. So yeah, they pull out like a little letter, that they're like, yeah, this has been with me ever since I left home. And it's literally their parents saying, you need help. So fun, Post-date review. Days come to an end. How to see how things go after. Do they say they want another date? Roll evens or odds. We roll on a d6. Evens. If evens, they want another date. At the end of the first, promise to contact you. Go to the aftermath. Roll a d10 on a 1 to 8. You've been ghosted. We've been ghosted. So a 9, 10. 1 to 8, you've been ghosted. They won't contact you again. 9 or 10, you've been ghosted. You won't hear from them again, at least regarding a second date. But be warned, Night City can be a frighteningly small space when it needs to be. So what our GM did, what James Hutt did at this point, is he made up a third possibility that we were basically forced into, where, hey, wow, she wants another date. And it's like, oh, wow, that's not how it should end ever. And I even asked him about it later in the day because we were together for most of the convention, and we had dinner that night together. And I'm like, James, like, what was that? Like, what would have happened if you rolled that? He's like, have you ever seen that at the end? I'm like, God. So immediately I was wizened up to, like, I pulled a fast one on your crew, and it was fun. So I was like, okay, cool, James. Yeah, that's awesome. So basically, one of our players went through this date path with a ganger at a corporate cookout in the, like, one of the rougher parts of the city that James was like, oh yeah, it's, like one of their charity functions, right? They're showing you guys, a little bit of hospitality as like a community bonding event, right? So this dude and his ganger girlfriend had a great date. She's like, I want to go on a second date. Hey, why don't we play that wonderful game that you always love to talk about, Elflines Online? So that's what tied us into the game. So I think now that we kind of talked through what this is, so this is the kind of thing that door can open. The other thing too is if we do even just use this as it is, this is going to talk about, where we've been ghosted. Maybe you have a grudge about that. Maybe it doesn't sit so great with you. Maybe especially if you're a very like ego-driven person like a rocker boy, this is maybe a little too much for your ego. So you go off, and when you find this person next, it might not be so friendly. But so bottom line, when we get to the end of this, when we start that new date, right? We go to ELO. So let me pull that up here so that we can talk about ELO now. All right. So let's talk about Elflines Online. So Elflines Online, for the record, I had this deep lore corrected at Gen Con. Elflines was a JRPG that Mike Pondsmith originally wrote into the 2020 books. So all James did was say, well, that IP is advanced to an MMO now. And he described it as the worst kind of MMO that people love, right? So it's laggy, it's played in VR. He had us roll concentration checks to see if we could even deal with the nausea of, plugging into our headsets and doing the thing. And basically it's like lags happen all the time. It's very low resolution to prevent this being any more jarring than it has to be. It's monetized to hell and back. You got shop pop-up screens. Those of you familiar with like free-to-play MMOs or mobile games will know exactly what that looks like. This is what Elflines Online is. And so we're going to try going in here. So we've got the lore of the Elflands, so you know kind of what the basis of the game is. And they've got a skill list. So the skills are shorter. The skill list, I should say, is shorter. Several skills have been condensed from the original Cyberpunk red sheets. So these are kind of their own thing. The crazy cool thing is that I know RTG hasn't created character sheets for these skills specifically, where it's kind of that abridged version, but Foundry has this, where you can roll an ELO character up in there, and it has the appropriate skills with their bases and everything. And so this also tells you, like for animal handling, it is an empathy skill, not an intelligence skill in ELO. So like several of these have, changed that. And so this raises an interesting thing. So when we are trying to do something as our game character that bases on game mechanics, right? Like maybe we're working with an NPC in the game or a quest giver. You are going to primarily be using your in-game skills and stats and all of that. But if you are a player dealing with another player, you use your regular Cyberpunk Red character's skills and stats instead, because you are using your real person stuff to talk to another real person, right? So that's the interesting kind of breakdown. So in this game, we use GP instead of EB. GP is swapped, kind of like you can pay to win in this game. So we've got all kinds of armor, weapons, etc., sacred herbs. And so they talk about kind of the combat and healing. So the way that this works, though, is progression is a little different from your average game, right? So first you create a complete package character with 50 stat points, 60 skill points. So a little different than our average character creation because, again, compressed skill list, and our stats are going to have some chances for improvement. So ranks 1 to 3, we increase the stat by 1. This option has to be taken for the first 3 ranks, cannot be selected after. I believe there's also a matter here where, yeah, no stat may be higher than 8 at character creation or lower than 3, which is different than normal character creation where it can't be lower than 2. And then now we go through and increase the stat by 1 for the first 3 ranks. At the end of that, you are given a title based upon the stat you've taken a highest interest in. And so they're given a title based on which stat they chose to increase the most. So we've got int, reflex, dex, tech, cool, will, move, body, empathy. If you're an even spread, you've got a title even for that. So we've got, sage, bowmaster, blade dancer, quick hand, warm heart, I believe is that one. Yeah, warm heart, wild blood, windkin, bark shield, druid, and wayfarer. So these take the role of classes in the game. You do not have a rank beyond 10, so really low ceiling. They say this is to encourage people to roll up even more characters and play the game more, which sounds very scummy, and yeah, that's perfectly in line. When a character reaches rank 3, they are given that title, and then afterwards, starting with rank 4, you increase an X2 cost skill by 2, so that'd be either evasion, dance, melee weapon, archery, first aid, paramedic, or surgery. And then you can increase 2 different non-X2 skills by 2. So basically you get 2 increase points, or you could think of it like you get 4 increase points that you either have to invest all into 2 ranks of a X2 skill or 2 ranks each of 2 separate non-X2 skills. So that's what you do. You can pay to play. So subscription is 20 eddies a month for a single character, included in all lifestyles, starting at generic pre-pack. At good pre-pack and higher, you can have as many offline online characters as you need to sate your obsession, and almost always pay to remove revive sickness without really thinking about the expense. To play, you'll also need a Secretary Rush Revolution interactive braindance headset, which is 500 eddies, and a copy of Offline's Online, which is 50 eddies. And then you can pay to win by buying GP at the rate of an eddy per 100 gold while playing. Since all the items you can acquire in ELO can be traded to other players, there also exists a market for powerful ELO loot on the street. These items are bought and sold just like any other valuable commodity in Red, so call your fixer. ELO accounts are also sold just like in-game items are, the rank 10 character being worth about 500 eddies. So you can literally buy a character on the black market and just be like, yep, this is mine now. And Secretary doesn't really care about that, right? Because you're going to buy another one anyway. So when you interact with characters, this is what I was talking before. You use your Cyberpunk Red character skill when you're interacting with other people, and you use your ELO character skill whenever it makes sense to interact with people inside of the game world itself, right? So from here, we basically just talk about using this as a GM. So I'm here to say this can be your whole adventure. We literally did an episode of Neon Inferno where we did the ELO episode where we just played ELO the whole game. I'll link to that episode above here. And so you can take a look at, or rather over here, because I know I'm in the corner of the screen right now. And we will, show you kind of what that looks like. So this is kind of the fun thing, right? So this is just the baseline, right? None of this really describes what our average mooks look like or anything. It just kind of gives you a baseline of this. That's where the next part's going to come into. So we got expansion pack number 1. So this is going to just give a list of ELO players within the city, 10 ELO PCs on the Night City server, and it's going to have pre-generated elves. So this lets us kind of like, have other players for people to interact with, as well as some blank character sheets down here. This one, this is an okay DLC. Like this particular ELO expansion pack, I like it. It gives, some roll tables for us. It is not as comprehensive as I would have liked, but so as a standalone thing, I'd probably only give it like a 5 out of 10. But that's where we get Derek Siller's guide to Elflines Online. And this is a comprehensive walkthrough of the game as written by ELO veteran Derek Siller, which, if that is incorrect, fight me. I don't care. This dude is the biggest ELO nerd, and he just wants to teach new players how to play the game. So I literally passed this off to one of the players in my group in Neon Inferno who was, supposedly addicted to ELO. I'm like, you would know about this. And literally just let him be a trail guide for the players in the game. So I'm like, yeah, read this in advance, dude, and you'll be good to go. So they've got a little bit of a description for each enemy you can encounter. They also give you elite stats for them, so you can use them kind of as boss mobs or whatever. They also explain that this game is one of those that just reskins their monsters ad infinitum, and maybe just adds like a cute little ability or something. But all they do is basically reskin the same mob over and over and over again. So lots of fun, very cool. And so this is much better because this gives us actual creatures we can use. This gives us an example of what a monster in ELO looks like. This gives us examples of how to modify those monsters. And this is really where we get that kind of like PvE stuff, right? And they explain, like what all the raids look like, what all the dungeons look like, and there's like a leveling guide for you. So this, I thought, was like, okay, well, like this is probably the end of our ELO DLC because, we've got monsters now. We've got other players that we can, have stats for. We've got the baseline that explains what all of this is. They did one more. Elflines Online, the TCG. Which, this art, by the way, is amazing. Whoever did the art on this, which the art direction was Jay Kovach. The interior art, Robson Michel. I don't know if Jay was the one who did this. If you are the one who did this, preem work. I love this so much. They caught the Yu-Gi-Oh analog perfectly. But yeah, this is incredibly fun. So what this is a legit trading card game for ELO. And it uses, and I literally got my hands on decks of Cyberpunk themed playing cards just so that I could play this game one day. I still have yet to play it, but I really want to try it out just because it seems like it'd be really fun. So you've got rules for buying packs, creating packs outside of the game as the GM, buying singles, and then the pricing for that. You're ready to play. You bought your cards. You found someone to play against since this is a 2-player game. Now you're ready to duel. Here's the rules you need to play Night City's favorite TCG. And so it's like, you got deck construction rules for limited, constructed. Like, they literally thought about everything here. And then playing the game, the cards themselves, kind of what they are, right? Face cards are all like special, like spells and things. So that's really neat. And the jokers in this game. So for those of you who are old TM like I am, and remember the World of Warcraft trading card game, you will know what the concept of this is. So when you would play World of Warcraft trading card game and you would pull packs for it, right? Every so often, so that's the back card. So every so often you'd get a card in the back of your deck, or in the back of your pack, I should say, that had a little barcode at the bottom. And that's what the jokers represent in this game. So a joker is an item card, and you roll 2d6 to determine what item it is. And so it's going to have a little scratch code at the bottom there to give you the thing. And it's going to have a variable single cost. So you get, super repair hammers, tiny tents, dual flags, revive sickness cure. But all of these have different costs associated with them that you as a player might want to have. So it's just a neat little additional thing, and it does give us some extra items to consider for the game, right? And so cheating is also a rule that they have. And this gives, to add on to a previous video we did about using less used skills in Cyberpunk, which I will again link right over here. We talked about some skills that just aren't used very much. Gambling is kind of one of those. This gives a very good use for gambling. This gives you like a very direct use for gambling. And my argument to all of you as GMs, you could, in theory, use elements of this table to dictate other card games like poker or blackjack as well in the game, so as to give players a route to maybe pull one over on a casino, or maybe an unscrupulous movie-esque villain akin to what we see in like John Wick 4. So yeah, all kinds of fun stuff you can do with this. And then they've got merch. So you got a dual caster, which those of you who know anything about old school Yu-Gi-Oh, we had dual discs back in the day. I have one somewhere here. And I'm not going to go pull it out on camera, but we have it, and they have one in here. And this is the first 3 rate of fire weapon, and I think the only one that they've made so far. And they may not make another, I don't know. But the fact is, it's 3 rate of fire because you load the deck in, and then you can literally point it at an enemy and fire these hard plastic cards at your enemies and ruin them in the process. So if you are a card grading freak, you're probably gonna cringe a little at that. Like, I'm not gonna use my weapons as cards, or my cards as a weapon. I'm not gonna use them as projectiles. Night City you might. So that is a thing. There's also the Scarlet Black Bow, which is a real bow that you could use, right? A cosplay recreation. It's an exotic, poor quality bow, and you'll snap it on a critical failure. And when it destroys itself beyond repair, the battery pack electrocutes the wielder, dealing him 66 damage. Soaked by the armor is normal for electrocution. And then there's the Sword of Arvish, as seen in Elflines Online. Real metal replica of the legendary Sword of Arvish, wielded by the hero himself. The pride of any elf's mantle. It is big, it is heavy, and you aren't a real fan unless you have one. A poor quality, one-handed, exotic, heavy melee weapon. If you roll a critical failure, instead of the weapon malfunction, you instead suffer the crushed fingers of critical injury to the hand that you were using to wield it. So it literally just like flops down and crushes your hand. So real fun. And then, even better, they give you little pack packaging. So if you as a GM want to do actual like tabletop ELO shit, you can do this and print these out and cut them down and have yourself a little crafting experience. And if you're using transparent sleeves, you could even print these out for card backs. So like you can just have them all match, because like I have this Cyberpunk deck, but I'm sure many of you have a bunch of mismatched bicycle decks that are like red or blue or something else. Well, this doesn't affect that then, so you can literally just use it. Also, Puddle Forge Games, shout out. Great game company, absolutely love it. Has no relation to the people who made Cyberpunk whatsoever. It's fun. I like this a lot. So I think like this is a 10 out of 10 DLC, just because this is a whole ass second game that branches from ELO, but it has a couple of tie-ins, does a couple cool things, and I really like it. So the only other DLC that I want to talk about tonight that is kind of a mini game. So the only other one I want to talk about tonight is the Achievements and Lootboxes DLC. So I'm going to pull that up right now. So Achievements and Lootboxes. So this is kind of a mini game. And I say this kind of because, again, kind of like this salvaging Night City DLC and the Date Path DLC, this is not gonna be one that maybe is a direct game per se, but we as GMs love these kinds of releases, especially those of you out there who are aspiring actual play creators, like what I do. If you want to do some actual play shenanigans and you're like, man, I want donation incentives, or man, I want channel point incentives, we got loot boxes. So the way that you're supposed to use this DLC as they intended it is you've got achievements similar to like a console game. So you've got, you know, reach rep 7, survive a combat in which the crew receives 3 or more critical injuries. All crew members must survive the fight. So like, you know, all of these are just stuff, complete dungeon ELO without anyone in your party dying. All of this stuff is like, you're going to have a combination of things that are serious kind of things, like what you get for like leveling up a character to a certain level in the game or clearing like a major story hurdle. But this also has interesting stuff like this one, Going Dark. Complete a typical or dangerous job without engaging in a single round of combat. When I say I legit changed how I played to try and in spirit get this, even though our GM's not using these, I really fucking tried to get through a whole adventure without going to combat. We got this close. We got the very last encounter, and a couple bad rolls led us to not. And I'm like, fuck, okay. So as GMs, the cool thing is, even if you do not use this system, because the way that this works is you get a token, and then when you use that token, you get a loot box, right? Or you can reroll a single d10 rolled by one of the players after the die is cast. Keep the higher outcome of the 2 rolls. So you literally get to roll with advantage, and this has to be done before the GM announces the outcome and cannot be used on death saves. So this always is going to involve a little bit of risk on the player's part, but it's a neat concept, right? The other thing is you receive one of Mr. Amaze's mystery boxes. When redeemed, roll a d10 on the table of mystery to determine which box the crew receives. This is what I use for channel points on my channel on Twitch. So what we do is you've got a series of tables here, with the prime table being the table of mystery. So there's a D10 table that gives us 1 of 10 different loot boxes that have a D6 table associated that have a bunch of different items. So you find the one you want, and then you open it up and you get the item that opens. So I had it for channel points where a player could drop a mystery box for the crew, and then it would just pop into existence behind one of them. Never be afraid to do something that makes no physical sense with something like this. It is supposed to be a fun game at the end of the day. But as a result, we can use all kinds of stuff from this to inform adventures, right? So we can, for example, there's one here, The Happiest Place. Ride the roller coaster at Playland by the Sea and survive. What about that roller coaster makes it so dangerous? We don't know. We don't actually know. So you as a GM can literally take this and run with it. And it's hilarious, you know, what you can do with this. Or stand in the ruins of Arasaka Towers. Why are we there? Well, now we can design a whole adventure around that. We can determine why we would do that. 1 is the loneliest number. This is like, you know, finish a fight with 1 HP remaining. But again, I encourage you to share these achievements like you would in a game with your crew. And then say, okay, guys, here are the achievements that you can unlock in this game. And let that inform your table a little bit. Let that inform their decision making. And for you GMs, let it inform your design of adventures that will take them to some of these places. Because it really is a fun way to do that. So, with that said, this is going to be the end of this video. So I'm going to go back to the main screen here so we can kind of tie this all together. All right, everyone. So that's the end of the video this week. So to tie it all together, I think these DLCs have a ton of potential for us as GMs. I think that some of these can lead to really interesting adventure hooks. Some of them are going to inform our understanding of life in Night City or even other cities, right? These can just as simply apply to any city you want to set your game in, whether that be Chicago or Shanghai or Seattle, wherever you might hold a game, you can have these things in there, because you can bet your ass the corporations have spread word of things like Elflines Online or Digital Gladiator, and Stickball is, you know, just a revamped version of an old street game. So like, this will have spread, right? Like there are going to be people who talk about this. The net is not totally cut off, so inevitably this is going to get around. Word will eventually reach these places so that it makes sense in the lore for you to run this for your group. But I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope this was informative. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those in the comments down below. Those of you on Reddit, when I post this there, feel free to ask whether they're on Reddit itself or here on YouTube. I will be more than happy to answer any questions or respond to ideas. If you have stories of you all using these, I would love to hear them. Like I said, there's some of these that I have not found a great way to engage with personally at my table yet, but I would love to hear stories of those people who have engaged with them and the kind of shenanigans or antics that your crew or you got up to as a result of that. But as always, my name is Emmerron. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you liked it and think I've earned your subscription. And as always, I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until we talk again, peace.